Hello, welcome back to my Thoughtful Thursdays video channel. I know what you're thinking. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. It's so great to be here with you in this snowy winter wonderland. Last week I shared a story about a time that the church got something really right during a beautiful moment. Then I shared about how that same beautiful moment turned rather quickly. Well, today we get to talk about another time when the church turned rather quickly. This is a shout out to Ruth, my mother-in-law, for giving me the idea this week. These ideas are not my own, rather they are carefully researched views that have already been made by others. The church can turn on a person on a dime. It was ugly. It was not an amazing time in the church. It was not a proud moment for those who call themselves evangelicals. And we have to talk about it. We can't shy away from it. There is a tendency in the evangelical church to just act like everything is okay. Just keep with the status quo. Nothing to see here. The pain that you feel, that history, we must repress that because it would look bad on the church. Well, friends, I'm here to tell you that addressing wrongs that we've done in the past is not what looks bad. It was that we did them in the first place that looks bad. And when we keep doing them, it looks bad. It only adds insult to injury when people today want to deflect, divert, distract, or even outright deny any wrongdoing. It just makes us look worse. I love the church. I believe that we can do better. We can learn from the past. However, that requires people to actually sit with really hard and uncomfortable truths. Are you ready to sit with these uncomfortable truths, church? Today we're talking about the evangelical support of Jimmy Carter and their hasty rejection of him. Jimmy Carter was the first born-again evangelical Christian elected to the office of the presidency. He was outspoken in his faith. He loved Jesus. He loved people. He served as a deacon in his church. He frequently taught Sunday school. In fact, most pundits at the time regarded Carter's rise to the top as due to the evangelicals that supported him. They helped push him over the edge. He could attract evangelical voters like no other at the time. He was so good at it, in fact, that Newsweek called 1976 the year of the evangelical. And this was in stark contrast to just a year earlier, Time magazine asking the question, is God dead? The white evangelical church of America finally had their man. They loved him. His faith was so incredibly strong and rich. Then, by 1980, the evangelicals had all but thrown him in the gutter. In fact, for many evangelicals today, Jimmy Carter's name is a household swear word. Instead, names like Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump are now lauded as the golden boys of the white evangelical church. What in the flipping world happened? Ronald Reagan didn't even attend church. He was lauded by evangelicals as the family values president, yet he was the first president to be divorced, a value that evangelicals staunchly opposed. He was also estranged from his own kids. He was the poster boy for evangelicals in a moral majority, yet regularly sought counsel from an astrologer. That's right, an astrologer by the name of Joan Quigley. She would draw up his charts in the stars and have long phone conversations with the president. She made him detailed calendars that were color-coded for good days and other days were colors when he couldn't go out. Reagan set his schedule strictly according to what his personal astrologer told him, frequently starting meetings at strange times because his astrologer told him to. That seems strange. Women in evangelical churches have felt shame for years after getting divorced from their abusive husbands. LGBTQ teenagers have been forced into conversion therapy and led to feel that there was something innately wrong with them. People have felt shamed by the church leaders for not filling the pews every Sunday. Hell, Magic 8 Balls and Harry Potter were on the blacklist for being too occult. Yet Ronald Reagan was the golden boy of the evangelical Christian. Does anyone see a disconnect here? But Jimmy Carter, not that other guy. He was trash, a deacon to his church. Faith being important to him, give me a break. The first born-again president, I heard he wants to give poor people health care. What a loser. He taught Sunday school and built houses for poor people. He was basically the Antichrist. This guy is crap. We want the guy who is estranged from his kids and consorts with an astrologer to make decisions. He's our guy. I don't even care that he was divorced or consorted astrologers. To each his own, that's not my thing. However, it was the way that the church quickly enveloped him into their tribe, their ethos, their way. It didn't really matter what he did. They had to hold him up now as the poster boy for white evangelicalism. Kind of makes us think about another person whom the white evangelical church has become enamored with lately. And here is where the powers that be got the evangelical church sideways with him. I'll give you a hint. It wasn't his views on healthcare. It wasn't his views on Israel. It wasn't even his views on abortion, although that is a very good guess. It was, ding, 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 racism and taxation. Who would have guessed? I can't get into all the specifics today because the history is so deep and I'd need a 3-part video series just to explain it. Here's basically what it boiled down to. segregation in schools was officially ended, which of course made white people very upset. How dare you make us go to school with black people? And famous Christians like Bob Jones, for whom the university was also named, believed that segregation was a biblical mandate. But you see, this pesky little court ruling called Green versus Connelly existed. It said this: under the Internal Revenue Code, properly construed, racially discriminatory private schools are not entitled to the federal tax exemption provided for charitable educational institutions, and persons making gifts to such schools are not entitled to the deductions provided in case of gifts to charitable educational institutions. Oh, that made white people furious! You see, you had these private Christian universities that still wanted to be able to legally segregate. They didn't want to allow black people in. The IRS, of course, started looking into these private universities. They were sending out letters and surveys to try and figure out what was happening. Basically, hey, you guys still racist? We'd like to know. Like, are black people even allowed to attend universities? Because if you're still being racist, you can't be tax exempt and racist at the same time. Please write back. Bob Jones University wrote back boldly, "We do not admit African Americans." However, some of the other universities were a little more crafty about their responses. Take, for example, Liberty University. Yes, the same Liberty University that was founded by Jerry Falwell, the leader of the moral majority, the most outspoken critic of Jimmy Carter. He was sneakier than Bob Jones University. You can't just say such racist things out loud. You have to be more careful about it. Still racist, yes, just less in-your-face racist. I like to call it Christian racism. Every bit as hurtful, just not as loud. These private white evangelical universities still wanted legal segregation. We want to be able to segregate to our heart's content and not allow the government to tell us what to do. Next strategy was to try the old Religious Freedom Act. I should be able to treat anybody however I want because of my religion. And the IRS is all like, no. So some universities then allowed black students in, only if they were already married. And in other universities, interracial dating was of course strictly prohibited. Jerry Falwell was furious. How dare the government tell me that I have to admit black people into my university? That's when he famously said it's easier to open a massage parlor than to open a Christian school. Oh, Jerry, you really didn't want to allow black people into your university, did you? Evangelical leaders quickly realized that if they were going to keep these universities open and not receive government money but still get the tax-exempt status from other prominent Christians, they were going to need a different strategy. Jimmy Carter and his deep religious faith were not moving him to bend on these tax laws. Sorry, you use your faith to discriminate, you lose your tax-exempt status. To which the evangelical leader said, but we really want to discriminate. And they realized that they needed the government to not be breathing down their necks, asking these prying questions like, do you admit black people? How dare the government ask such questions? American religious conservative Paul Weyrich and Jerry Falwell were at the front lines. They realized how much power this group had in America. Really, it was an untapped voting bloc that could be swayed towards conservatism. Moral majority that the evangelical leaders were trying to lead needed some special ingredient. They needed that secret sauce, the catalyst, if you will. They realized that overt racism wasn't going to build the grassroots movement that they were hoping for. They needed to find a different front. To make a long story really short, they went with abortion. That would be the public front that they would use to ultimately get what they wanted behind the scenes. Bob Jones University was stripped of their tax-exempt status, and their case then was ultimately seen before the Supreme Court. The court ruled against Bob Jones, ruling an 8-1. The sole dissenter was one William Rehnquist. Yep, you guessed it, the same William Rehnquist who Reagan later elevated to the role of Chief Justice. It's amazing how things like that work. But Jimmy Carter was out. The white evangelical moral majority had spoken. They didn't want a born-again Christian who taught in church, whose faith greatly impacted his life. They threw that guy out. They wanted Reagan, who consorted an astrologer. The moral majority no longer cares if the president has affairs or pays off porn stars or grabs women by the... They just want their agenda to be made. That agenda being, they want to be able to legally discriminate. Tale as old as time. Friends, that's all we have for this week. I'm going to take the next 2 weeks off to enjoy time with my family, but we'll see you back here at the beginning of the year. I love you all. Merry Christmas.